Hey.
Welcome to Investories, Ivory Becker. Hi, Ivory.
Hello, thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
I am doing very well. It's been an interesting day so far, but we're just rolling with the punches.
Wait, you did say that before the record,
Uh-huh.
so I think first of all, we need to know what that interesting day is, and then we need to flow into who are you, where have you come from, what are you doing, all that good stuff.
Sure. So I go to the gym every morning. I go really early. Today I went a little late, thank goodness. So my car decided it wanted to stop working because my key fob died. And so I ended up having to the one day, it's quite cold here now for Washington for the winter. And the one day that I was like, I can get by with just a sweatshirt. My car dies and I have to walk about a mile to the grocery store to buy a battery for the fob just to get it to work again. So that's how my morning started. Got to work just in time right before interviews for a position I have open. So it's been a Monday.
So we can call
Sounds
it
like
extra
someone's got a case of the Mondays.
extra
I
cardio.
do today.
So Ivory is a credit educator, credit restoration specialist, and we're going to dive into what that is. She has a company, Incite Strategies, and a super interesting kind of field to be in, and something we all kind of shy away from. Ivory, can you give us the kind of the cliff notes of how you got to where you got to, kind of that flow into this industry?
Sure, definitely. I started in the industry back during the financial crisis, specifically on the big bank side, working with people who were victims of the subprime mortgage crisis, dealing with restructuring of the over-leveraged debt, moved into regulatory compliance and default. And then it was like, poof, one day, great job. We've passed all the DOJ consent orders. We know how the CFPB works. We know the new regulations. So that's it for you. And it was sort of this like, well, now what do I do? I've just spent almost 10 years dedicating my life to everything that had to do with default. And I found myself going into financial planning, but through the course of my general conversations with people, one thing kept coming up, and that was credit and debt, and how to effectively manage credit and debt, because that's just not a heavy focus in financial planning. Eventually I realized, what am I doing? Because I steer every conversation that way. And I stopped doing the financial planning side of things and really focused on credit. And I opened my company, Incite Strategies, and I still partner with financial advisors, of course, but now I manage the debt side of the balance sheet and the credit side, which I like to say is the forgotten asset of your balance sheet. So.
Gotcha. So Insight Strategies, and I got a chance to meet Ivory up in Portland when we both spoke at an event, and it was really it was wonderful to see the engagement of the crowd whenever Ivory came on to talk about what it was that Insight Strategies did, and I learned a ton of stuff. I mean, it was pretty amazing. A lot of the things that she spoke about, I wasn't even privy to, and so I learned a lot of things from her. And Ivory, kind of tell us about what is your typical client, what do they come to Insight Strategies for? And are these real estate investors? Are these business people? Are they all the above? What do people come to you for?
So we get a lot of people that come to us that are either buying their first home or that are real estate investors, and they have decent credit, but they want excellent credit. Or a lot of small business owners that may have become overextended or had some sort of a credit issue early on in the opening of their business, and now are trying to get some business loan so they can go from the beginner track of having the business to really focusing on the growth side of their business, but they need the leverage to do it. So I would say those are the three main tracks of our client base. We tend to get all of our clients either from loan officers, real estate agents, or business bankers for the most part. But of course, there's always social media too, where people find us.
And do people typically come to you because they're attempting to repair their credit problems, or are they? I mean, I know you said they want to get better credit, but like, what type of problems are they bringing to you, or I guess what is the problem that you're solving there?
Sure. So it's multi-level, right? Most people that come to us have some sort of a negative item on their credit report, whether that's a late payment, a random Comcast collection, or medical bill that popped up on their credit report. usually somebody has gone through some sort of a hardship at some point and they're well past it, but the negative information stays on their report for 7 years. So that's what tends to happen. And they start to focus on it when they're trying to get approved for a financial product. And that's why we obtain our clients from those other professionals. But those professionals do also come to us in a different sense, which is more where the educational aspect of our business comes into play.
And let's dive into that. In terms of the educational piece, what's the kind of hard and fast or the biggest rule or trend or something you could apply to the broadest audience in terms of education?
How to read a credit report. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Most people understand I can see what accounts are on my report, and that's great, but they don't know how to read it. I would say it's like critical thinking, right? You can read something, but do you actually comprehend it? It's the same with credit reporting, being able to dissect that report and understand what's helping and what's hurting, and looking at what's helping and how you can optimize it, make it work better, what may be missing that you can add, and then similarly, what's hurting and what you can do about it. Most professionals just aren't given that level of training, unfortunately. Even if they do work at a big bank or even if they are in the lending environment, it's just not a piece of the process, yet it's a main focus of an approval.
So out of curiosity, now I'm not real good at reading a credit report. Most people's eyes, what they're going to go to is that credit score, right? And that for lay people like myself, I'm gonna pull up my own credit report, my one yearly free credit report that I get, and I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna look at that score and be like, all right, I'm doing fine, and then I'll close it out. So what makes up a good credit profile? If somebody is relatively new in either business or real estate, and they're thinking, all right, I know the path I want to go down, but I've got this, I wouldn't call it a roadblock, but maybe a speed bump in my way, which is building my credit the right way that banks will really like me. What does that credit profile look like? What should people be focusing on doing?
Sure. No, that's a great question. When I'm going to give the quick Cliff Notes version because we could talk about this all day. Credit is something that seems simple, but is quite tedious. And I wouldn't say it's complicated, but there's a lot of moving parts. So the biggest things that can be focused on is one, longevity of the credit file. So how much credit history there is, the longer, the better. And then how good that payment history is. Are payments made on time? I think that's the one most people are aware of. Pay things on time. It benefits your credit. Credit mix is also looked at. So that's going to be the blend between the types of accounts that you have a history paying. So you don't want to only have a credit history of just loans or only a credit history of just credit cards. That algorithm that determines the score is really focused on the ability to pay any type of debt successfully and to manage that debt effectively, thinking balances. So that leads to utilization, which is a misunderstood piece of the algorithm. So credit utilization is pretty much solely focused on the ability to keep a low ratio on any sort of revolving debt. So a credit card or a line of credit. It's not looking at loan balances. And this is where a lot of people, when they are working on improving their credit, often will pay down things like auto loans or other types of installment debt super fast, thinking that's going to in turn improve their score, but it doesn't, unfortunately. The last thing is inquiries and new credit. This tends to be where people make their highest focal point. But it really should be a lower focal point. Inquiries are a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the credit pie. It's part of the 10% of the new credit section. So excessive inquiries will have a severe impact on somebody who may have a very limited credit history. Maybe they only have 1 or 2 open accounts, but is quickly resolved just by the establishment of new history. So inquiries are not something to worry about. So it's kind of a counterintuitive point when building. Don't worry about the inquiries. You got to have the history, which means you have to have things on the report. You got to have inquiries to get those things. So
that's really interesting. And I think I lucked out with my loan guy because he gave me all these tips when we bought our house here, which is really cool along those lines. Probably not quite as advanced strategy wise. In terms of, and I'm thinking kind of that from that getting started piece. And I came to the country with no credit, so I went through that building phase. what's kind of the best way for someone with either low credit or no credit to get started?
Yes. So nowadays we actually sell a credit, like a credit establishment plan for people who are in a similar situation where they don't have a credit history. But the best way you can go about it is starting with credit building products. There's several on the market today. You can go to a local bank. You can find them online. Self is a great credit building product that I think most people have heard of, which is why I'm choosing to bring that one up. But it provides the option of a credit builder account along with a credit card. So it gives you that credit card that's secured by, it's kind of like a reverse loan. You pay into it monthly, they give your money back at the end of the loan term instead of you getting it at the beginning, but then that secures the credit card. That's a great way to contribute to each of the factors of the FICO score algorithm. Although it's not enough to fully build a profile, if you're not sure what to do and you need somewhere to start, it's a great place to start.
So as far as types of credit is concerned, I guess types of credit lines are concerned, that's one of the things that kind of can trip people up. There's so many different types of credit lines out there. There's auto loans, there's real estate loans, there's trade lines and revolving lines of credit. Do these types of credit, as far as let's talk about lenders for a second, because that's going to be most important to our listeners. When they look at a credit report and they pull up and they see, real estate and they see auto loan and then they see, Maurice's clothing store and then they see Home Depot. I mean, what types of credit lines can hurt or help you, or are they all created equal?
I would say they're all created. I wouldn't say they're all created equal. I personally, from my opinion, believe credit cards are in a higher echelon than the rest because credit cards impact more of your score factors. Everything else is created equal outside of the credit card. And it doesn't mean that you can get away with credit cards only, because you absolutely can't. That's when you try to go get an auto loan and you have no loan history and they're like, you have a 700, but we need a cosigner. So you still don't want to forget about the other pieces. But when you are trying to build that perfect credit profile, when you're going into that lending situation, the goal is to mitigate your debt to income ratio, right? You don't want to have this excessively high debt obligations just because you were trying to build your credit, while also at the same time maintaining that high credit score where you're hitting all the factors of the algorithm. So typically our recommendation is if you do have these installment products and you do go to your mortgage lender and they say, hey, we'd like your debt to income to be a bit lower, you don't immediately want to pay things off. You want to pay things off with the closing of that mortgage, right? So your credit score is not negatively influenced by the closing of that account, which can be 50, 100 points in some cases if you have a limited credit profile going down. Not what we want to see. So you would do that as part of closing and effectively keep your score high. So the best answer is to create a robust profile by adding as much information onto your report as you can. You nowadays can add your day-to-day bills onto your credit report. That didn't used to be a possibility even, 5 years ago. So there's a lot of tools out there that will allow you to put those things on your report. Those items like your cell phone bill are not part of your debt to income ratio, but now your score can benefit from it. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, and do you guys have at Incite Strategies, do you guys have the ability to help people do that sort of thing? I don't even know how to do that.
Sure.
I'd love to know how to do that. That's something that's we obviously have a lot of bills just like most Americans do these days. I'd love to be able to put that on my own credit report. So do you guys offer that service?
We don't offer it through our company. We have a lot of partnerships. So when somebody signs up with us, we give them a credit reestablishment or establishment plan, which details everything that they can do to add good information onto their report. And then we'll go through a more detailed approach that's specific to that individual. But those plans are on our website, so anybody can go and get access to all of it. There's just so many companies out there that exist now to help you build credit that just weren't there before. One of the important things to consider, though, is where you're getting your score, especially on the lending side, right? Because it's a different version of FICO than what most people are seeing when they pull their credit.
And in terms of that, can we unpack that a little bit in terms of why there's different scores or what score someone should be paying attention to?
Sure. So credit scoring is a confusing system for many people, and I believe it's meant to stay that way on purpose, but that's my own personal vendetta. So we have we have the FICO score and we have the Vantage score. The Vantage score is what you see on your free credit polls when you go to like Credit Karma or Credit Sesame or you name it. If you're getting a free score, it's probably a Vantage score. If you're getting a score from your credit card company, scroll to the very bottom of the webpage, check the disclosures at the bottom, and it may say Vantage or it may say FICO. So first thing to know is there's a difference between Vantage and FICO. The Vantage score was created by the bureaus in 2006. It's not a FICO credit score. It's not what any lender is using to qualify you. And the algorithm functions completely different. Your score can be, 100 points different up or down. It's not necessarily always going to be worse better, excuse me. FICO score is what's used in banking nowadays. It's over 90% of decisions are with FICO score. But there are several versions of FICO from 2 all the way to 10 and 10T. So there's a lot of different versions out there. The whole point of different versions of FICO scoring is just to say consumer behavior has changed, and a credit score is meant to predict what is the likelihood that that consumer can pay their obligations without going into default, right? Are they going to pay on time? How much risk am I taking on as an institution to lend to them? So as there are changes in consumer behavior, they adjust the algorithm to reflect what they deem a responsible consumer looks like. Certain industries choose to use the older versions of FICO and not to adjust to the new versions. The mortgage industry is one of them. They're using FICO Classic, which is the oldest version. I believe it was like 1980, 80-ish, 80 something, when that version came out. So quite old at this point, but it is a harsher version in my mind. When I look at it, those scores tend to be a bit lower. There's a lot less flexibility, a lot more rigidity with that score. So going into the lending process, you can obtain that score. You just have to buy it. So you can buy it from the bureaus. You can buy it from other places like My FICO or My Score IQ is the one we use with our clients. But yes, there are a lot of versions used in different types of lending.
Interesting stuff. I'm curious about children. I have 3,
Sure.
and I've always wanted to at least get them on the road. So I protect my own credit like I do my firstborn, right? I think it's one of the most important things. If anybody, I think banks are a necessary evil, but that's a discussion for another time. But we have to play that game if we want to have, I guess, be able to build and grow and use bank debt for all kinds of different things, whether it's real estate, business, whatever, credit cards even. And I'm curious about for people who are raising families and they have that same mindset that I do, that they want to bring their children up with them. What can we do when our children are young in order to start building a credit profile for our kids?
I love this question. So you can start building a credit profile for your children typically around 16. Some individual institutions are allowing it even younger, but it's going to be harder to find. 16 is pretty much when you can typically start. So you can make them an authorized user on one of your credit cards. They also have cards for minors now. You're a co-signer. You're co-signing with your child. They're a minor, so they don't own the card, but you can get it put in their name. Even now, there are cards that are geared towards children entering into college, so young adults, I should say, that you can get them set up with as they transition. But adding your child to your credit card is going to be the best way to go. Teach them how to use it responsibly. And then when they graduate, when they're 18, they're going to have, a perfect credit score walking into the world. They still may encounter that situation where they need a cosigner on the auto loan because they have no installment history. But in most regards, they're not going to have trouble finding an apartment to rent. They're not going to encounter these difficulties that I see quite often with a lot of my younger clients that are in their early 20s who they just didn't know how the system works. They weren't taught anything about it in school, nor through their parents, and ended up getting into trouble because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know how any of it worked. So teaching them those habits younger is just, oh, it's great.
I really like that. And I think it is a bit like a tap. Like when I was 18 in the UK, I got a credit card and was like, oh my goodness, and hadn't had the training to do that. Speaking of which, on your website, you talk about that ability or that openness of there's training available. What does that training typically look like? And I guess I say that as someone who consumes a lot of real estate training. So I'm interested in the credit aspect.
Sure. So we have a course that goes into how the entire credit scoring system works. It goes into the depths of each algorithm, how the algorithms function, and how lenders look at your credit scores. It also goes into understanding the intricacies of what brings your score up and what brings it down. It's a big decision tree, right? If this, then that, if that, then this, and understanding that path, if you will, so you can get to that perfect credit score. So it's really all of the secrets that the credit bureaus really don't want you to know that I've been able to compile over the last 15 years, because a lot of it just is not public knowledge, and a lot of it I've acquired from hearing different speakers from FICO who actually create the algorithm, as well as things that are on the back end of the bank side that public doesn't get to see. It also walks you through reading a credit report and what to look for, what to do, how to understand reason codes and the score factors, which are the direct contributor to the score you see at the top of that report, right? And understanding reason codes. If you can walk away with anything, whether you're a professional, whether you're an investor, doesn't matter who you are, if you pull your credit report, the most important thing you could ever know, you can ever look at, is the score factors section. That's what I think any consumer, any human who has a credit score needs to know, is read your score factors. That's your secret key to what's going on with your score.
Excellent. And I think one of the most beneficial things, and something I'm still trying to learn anyways, is credit protection. You know, it seems like all the time, almost daily, I'm hearing about somebody got their identity stolen. You know, somebody got a hold of somebody else's, social security number and opened up a bunch of credit cards, applied for loans in their names, blah, blah, blah. So what can people do? I've heard of things like freezing credit. I've heard of you can go into each credit card and freeze that credit card so that it can't be used. You can freeze your social security number so that it, if it gets accessed. I don't really know how this works. Maybe if you can give our listeners a little bit of background on how protecting credit would help them and how they can do that.
So I'm going to be a bit of a Debbie Downer here, but pretty much everything is out there and available on the dark web. I mean, it is just not hard anymore to get your identity stolen, unfortunately. And also, on that topic, you really need to be careful of who you're giving your information to when you get calls. There's a lot of scam calls, right? We heard a lot about those during COVID, where people are actually giving their information away themselves on accident. But the best thing you can do is have some sort of credit monitoring setup. So at least if something does occur, you know about it right away. You certainly can do freezes on your credit file. So you can do a freeze with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, which should prevent any accounts from being opened in your name. Now, obviously, you will have to unfreeze your accounts if you are applying for something. Freezing does not stop you from monitoring your credit, so you can still have some active credit monitoring with a freeze on your credit file. You can do a freeze with the other reporting services like LexisNexis, which is where public records are, but ultimately, none of us are safe anymore. And it's more, in my mind, about the monitoring more so. So if something does occur, you can take action immediately, where you want to file a police report, you want to file fraud affidavits with the credit bureaus, and obviously go to any of the creditors where there was fraud and talk to their fraud department. That's the first thing you ask. We see identity theft every day, and we help people with identity theft every day. But you have to get to the right department with the creditors, because the other people just don't know what to do. And then you end up, we've seen too many people paying for things that they should have never paid for.
And I guess on the same subject of being a Debbie
Mhm.
Downer, because I can be one as well.
Jeez, guys.
Yeah, I know. This is the depressing episode, that's okay. This is the important stuff, right?
Mhm.
So somebody gets their identity stolen. I mean, what
Yes.
kind of, I have been blessed enough not to have that happen to me, and I do
Mhm.
everything I can to keep a pretty close eye and keep my fingers on the pulse of my own credit and what's going on with all my stuff. So, but let's say
Mhm.
it happens, and it may. Let's say it happens. How
Mhm.
long does this take to get? I know it's probably very subjective because it depends on what
Uh,
happens, but I mean, I
yeah.
understand this can be a very lengthy process and an extremely damaging one. And so, for somebody, I'm sure somebody's listening that's had this happen to them before. What's the process? How do they? You already said make the police report and contact the agencies,
Yeah.
but how fast is the turnaround? How can somebody get back on the road?
I mean, the police report really is just so you have something to show creditors to be clear about that piece. Often it's not going to do anything other than that. Now, we have worked with people who have actually been victims of extremely severe identity theft to the point that, one of the people was put in jail for like 25 years because of all the victims. So we've seen some severe identity theft. So it's definitely on a scale. But freeze everything immediately. Make sure you look at addresses that are showing up on your credit report, because what will happen is they'll open an account in your name and then do change of address. So you'll never even know about it unless you're pulling your credit. Be careful about your children and what you're putting on the internet about your children. It's really easy for identity theft to happen under your children's names. The second they turn 18, all of a sudden there's identity theft because you have their birthday out there on the internet. It's very easy for people to find where you live and you got your child's name. There you go. It's taken. It's a new trend we're starting to see a lot of, is identity theft for children. But I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but I think getting a professional immediately is one of the most important things you can do, because you're going to be spinning your wheels trying to figure it out. I mean, we get a lot of people who come to us after years of issues. And then, we'll solve it with 6 months to a year in the most severe cases. But it's just a lot of back and forth. And you're essentially having to prove on your creditors don't want to believe you that it's fraud at the end of the day, right? So you're fighting this uphill battle and it feels very demoralizing. So file all the reports. You got to do it with the credit bureaus. You got to do it with the FTC. You got to do it with the police if they'll let you. And then get somebody that can do the rest for you, because it's an all-day job talking to everyone.
That's super helpful. And I think what sticks with me is get an expert, right? We all rely on experts, especially in real estate. We all have trusted advisors, and it's no different finding that person that knows how to solve your problem and get you on the right track. So I think that's a great takeaway. I did want to pivot a little bit
Sure.
to be Debbie upbeat. I don't know if that's a thing, Carl. I'm new to these shores. I wanted to talk about we briefly talked about it before the call, really around business and and personal credit. And I think what I'm interested in, and as a real estate kind of investor and just spinning up and getting going, is how those two kind of fit together. So obviously I can't get a loan. I can't get a business loan for $1 million because my business is in its infancy. How does kind of business and personal credit sort of intertwine, and how can people kind of make the most of that?
Sure. So most often, if your business is 2 years or younger, any bank is going to rely on your personal credit. And then depending on loan amount after that, your personal credit still may be reviewed or relied upon for an approval. So what we see often is business owners being referred to us because they thought their personal credit wasn't going to matter, but they had built good business credit through business credit cards or equipment leases, things of that sort. The personal credit ends up being the backbone of a lot of approvals and dictating things like the interest rate, or helping to dictate the interest rate. So you cannot forget about that piece. when you are a small business owner or you're starting off in the real estate side of things. So really being able to optimize that score and understand the ins and outs of how it works is going to just set you up for success. We have a lot of investors that come to us where they've they've got their first couple properties, things went really well, but now they're like, okay, if I'm going to keep on doing this, but I'd really like to have my score above 740. That's the ideal, at least 740 to get the best rates possible. So if you can become a master of understanding how your own credit works, at the very least, if you don't want to work with a professional, that's totally fine. But monitor your credit, not on Credit Karma, monitor your real credit score and watch how different actions are influencing your score up and down. There are a lot of good resources out there, and there's a lot of horrible ones too, so be careful what you're looking at, but that can really help you use your credit as an asset. You teach yourself how to leverage your own credit. I mean, it's no different than debt. We leverage debt to propel our businesses. You got to leverage your credit in the same way. But a lot of people are afraid of, taking the time or spending the money on that side, which is, a foundation of moving forward as a business owner, or even in your personal investments. So.
And could you give us an overview of any of those tools or any you recommend that people should use?
For monitoring?
Mm-hmm.
For monitoring? Yeah, we use MyScore IQ for our client base. My FICO is another great one. Personally, we use MyScore IQ because it integrates with our education and our credit restoration system. But both platforms are wonderful. They give you alerts. They let you know, one, if there's new addresses in your name, things of that sort. But they have simulators in there you can play with as well. You can go to the credit bureau's websites and you can get monitoring through them. I personally am not a fan of using their sites only because it's a giant sales tool, giant sales funnel, if you will. You click any screen and you get like all these offers left and right. It's really meant to sell you, not help you. So my biggest recommendation would be either MyScore IQ or my FICO for sure, because it will give you all versions of your score. Go ahead. I apologize.
That was going to be my question. So these are actually giving you your score along with your whole credit profile. Does it give you that information for Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, the three big ones?
Yes. Okay. So you'll get all of your scores for each of the algorithms. So you've got FICO Classic all the way to the FICO 10. So that way you know where you stand. So there's industry specific versions of FICO, and MyScore IQ, for instance, there's tabs at the top where it says auto scores, mortgage scores, bank card scores, so your credit card. So FICO scoring is like an onion. You just peel the first layer and it just keeps on going. So there's a lot you can learn, a lot you can know.
Is there a difference between the big three, the Experian, the TransUnion, and the Equifax? Like, why are there three main credit reporting bureaus? I mean, what's the point?
Oh, interesting topic. Okay. So this is more credit history. So there used to be, so they're private companies. They're all three private companies. And in the 70s is when they became more heavily regulated and consolidated into the big three that we have now. Prior to that, there was just credit reporting agency after credit reporting agency, all spouting out different scores. And you had institutions using whatever reporting system they wanted, whatever algorithm that they wanted to qualify people. Some were quite discriminatory. Actually, they all were discriminatory. So when they regulated things, these are the three that survived. One of them did rebrand because of a massive lawsuit because of discrimination. Well, yeah. So I go into all the history in my course as well. It's actually quite interesting. But these three companies became the ones that were said to give you each score. And the version that they use of the algorithm is created by FICO. So FICO was made to be its own company. So the bureaus themselves could not control the algorithm. They needed a degree of separation. So FICO creates the algorithm, and then the three bureaus actually provide the scores based on the algorithm that FICO creates. So that was the separation that they put in place to try to make things a bit more less
So it kind of
muddy.
became almost a system of checks and balances then, essentially, is what it became.
That was the goal. Yes. Checks and balances, get rid of discrimination and create more fairness, with the bureaus being the ones to make sure things are run smoothly, I guess is the best way to put it. So
Amazing.
yeah, so that's why we have the three now.
And is that, I guess we could get cynical and say, does it work, or is it,
No,
a work in progress?
no, it does not work. No, it does not work at all. 70% of credit reports have errors. 53% of the regulatory complaints to the CFPB last year in 2021 were for items on people's credit reports that weren't theirs. So fraudulent, right? And only about 30% of the complaints were actually resolved. It's the system is very broken. It's very flawed. And then those in my industry are looked at extremely negatively. There's a lot of lobbying against what I do, especially from the credit bureau side, to try to portray that what we do is wrong in some way, when all we're doing is fighting for consumer protections and consumer rights that they just trample on. I mean, they get 30,000 disputes a day and barely respond to any of them. I can be on a soapbox about that all day, but
tell you
I
what,
won't.
when I hear things like there are industries lobbying against these types of businesses, that tells me that you guys are doing something right. And I think about it almost like the hotel lobbyists that are lobbying against Airbnbs because they don't want people to use their own personal house because they're losing money because nobody's staying at their hotels. Not to be like this conspiracy theorist person. That's just fact. You know what I mean? So it's like the fact that you guys have a business out there that are helping people fix issues, and you've got these big businesses that are just upset about that and up in arms about it and getting upset with you guys. It just drives me up the wall. But I believe it. I believe that it's out there.
Well, in reality, this business shouldn't even have to exist. True. Consumers should be able to go to the bureaus and say, hey, this is wrong. This doesn't make sense. And then they should take care of it. I mean, yeah, it's quite frustrating, and the laws are convoluted, right? I mean, it does make sense that we have to help the consumer understand what is compliant with the Fair Credit Reporting Act and Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. But if there's something on someone's report that's blatantly wrong, they should be able to say, hey, this is wrong, and then it should be fixed. It shouldn't be this long battle that has to exist. So
absolutely. So in terms of the business and yes, it's great to see you out on social media and kind of spreading this message is always good to see. And I think there's a lot of kind of fake gurus out there in pretty much every tranche of society. So it's kind of nice to run across people that are like actually doing it in real life. So kudos. In terms of what's next and the kind of growth of Incite, what does that look like for you?
Sure. So we are growing quite rapidly. The way we do business is we partner with other professionals, right? So our goal is to continue to try to help as many professionals help their clients across the country as we can. Right now, we've expanded we're in 28 states right now as far as our clients and our partners go. We're hoping to make more of an East Coast expansion. So we've been laying down more of a foundation starting in Florida. I actually have an employee out there in the Miami area right now, and been taking a couple trips out there to try to see like where we should land. But the goal is really to continue to expand with the heaviest focus on education. I feel that if we have a platform of education and we can help more and more people see what is actually fact, because like you said, unfortunately, and I'm probably hyper focused, but especially in my industry, there is just so much baloney out there on credit scoring. And there's a lot of selling of false facts. They're not facts. They're baloney. Then I think that we'll continue to be able to help a lot more people get real quality advice and really change their whole situation, because with everything as expensive as it is, having strong credit can get you so much further. And if there's a way I can help people be more successful and create that foundation, it starts with credit. And, until you have strong credit, you can't stop living paycheck to paycheck unless you're already raking in a whole bunch of money. And then you can finally save, and then you can finally invest. And that's the whole premise of what we do, is start with the foundation so people can build their life after that. So anyway, I rambled on, but goal is to keep growing, right?
Rambling's good. I ramble all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. So two-part question.
Yes.
Tell our listeners a little bit more about the specifics on how they get into your educational program. And
Sure.
then maybe give them some ways to get back in touch with you, because I'm sure there's going to be people that may have some questions and some follow-up stuff with you. So how do they get in touch with Ivory? Yeah.
So, alrighty. As far as my course goes, it can be found on trycreditworthy.com. You can also go to getcreditworthy.com. Is it gettingcreditworthy.com? See, I don't even know my own URLs. Gettingcreditworthy.com is it's all the written content. And then we have our course linked into all that written content. So for however people want to access it. So that's the course. As far as contacting us, incitestrategies.credit, spelled INCITE, is where you can book a free consultation. We always offer free consultations, free review of your credit report. And then, from there, we'll let you know how to improve your scores. And if you want to go down the credit repair path with us, then we're happy to help with that. But we like to make sure you know what's possible before you sign the dotted line, if you will. So that's where you can find us.
And socials, you're on Instagram, right?
Oh, we're on everything. So YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, everything is under Incite_strategies. So anywhere you want to find us, Incite Strategies, just make sure you spell it INCITE. And then you'll see my shining face everywhere you look.
Great. And we'll put the links in the show notes for all of that stuff.
Sure.
I love typing out URLs, so you're in luck.
I know. I kick myself when I made them, but it's too late because of SEO. You're like, can't go back.
I think they're great. Yeah, I think you're onto the right path anyway. Ivory, thank you so much for your time today. Absolute pleasure having you on. We'd love to get you back on and kind of delve a bit more, certainly with all that's going on in markets and recessions and all that kind of stuff. But thank
definitely.
you so much.
Thank you, Ivory.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. And we'll be back next week.